so honored to have our guest host, Mr. Paris McGee Jr. Paris is a sports reporter and a former Ohio State gymnast.
Go
So
back.
he understands everything from the male's perspective of being an athlete. So thanks for joining us today, Paris. I'm so honored to have you on Off the Fields because we really need athletes like yourself and people in our industry to speak up on certain topics, which you already know what we're about to get into.
Yep.
So we're going to be talking about, the NIL situation, basically how that's been changing the game of sports in the collegiate world and in the professional world. We're going to be talking about also colorism. Does that exist when it comes to NIL deals for athletes? And we're also going to be talking about, choosing an HBCU versus going to a PWI. And last but not least, Black ownership in the sports world. That's something that's on the surge. So I really think it's important to talk about these things. Paris agrees with me because these are things that weren't as prevalent or as popular to talk about when it comes to sports media. And now we can dig a little bit deeper. So when it comes to the NIL, me and Paris, we're talking about basically how there is a difference when it comes to the amount of money that certain athletes are receiving. So even though it seems like a large amount of money to the average person, millions of dollars, in the sports world and at a professional level or at a level where you reach, where they have, I'm talking about athletes like Angel Reese and Olivia Dunne and, Bronny James, these types of athletes. The money is on the table, but it needs to be, handled the right way and in a fair way. So recently there have been some changes in the NIL where, there are certain athletes who are making more than the other. And we think it has a little bit to do with colorism. Paris, can you just chime in on that a bit about the colorism and how we're seeing NIL deals like change the game in entirety?
It's hard not to put race into the situation because it is such a big factor, especially in sports and all sports. There was actually a sports historian, and I'm going to start with this quote, who famously said, her name is Amira Rose Davis. She said, "There's a double bind for Black women because there are already constraints on what women athletes are seen to be marketed as. And a smaller part of women athletes, Blackness, constrains them even more. So what they are left with are the crumbs." And I believe that people might not want to admit into the colorism or to the race part of the NIL, but it definitely is something to talk about. When it first broke out onto the scene, you had some women athletes that were kind of breaking those doors down. But when you look at those athletes they were white, blonde athletes. And of course, there's nothing to take away from them. As a former athlete myself, I know the work that it does. I know the work that these athletes put in. But the truth is the truth. You look at the Cavender twins, who were first at Fresno State and then they transferred to Miami. You look Cameron Brink, Olivia Dunne, even Paige Beckers. She became the first college athlete to sign with Gatorade ever, which is huge. But when you look at all these athletes, something that they do all have in common is that, they are white. And when you look at even the timeline of the NIL, you had Aaliyah Boston, who was a basketball sensation. She was the national champion with South Carolina, but she didn't light up NIL deals. And if you want to be honest, it really was Angel Reese who kind of broke down the door for Black women, for Black athletes with these major NIL deals. But, it came with a lot of hate, a lot of criticism. We all know how Angel Reese was talked about, when she celebrated her, her little national championship win,
Exactly.
compared to Caitlyn,
Right.
who, when, she did her little signal, it wasn't an issue. But when Angel Reese did it, it was, whoa, she's ghetto and, she's out of play and this isn't sportsmanlike. But it's sports. This is a game and this is how us athletes play it. So with that being said, I do believe that colorism, race played and still plays a big factor when it comes to NIL deal, especially for Black women and Black women athletes.
Yeah, I remember like you were telling me, we were talking about this before, how when Angel Reese did her Sports Illustrated cover, her spread, and then you look at Olivia Dunn's, there's a big difference, right?
Yeah,
And that's just like looking at it with the naked eye, not
right.
looking at it from somebody who's worked in the sports media industry, not looking at it with that eye or a producer's eye or anything like that, just the naked eye. What were some of the differences that you saw? Because for me, it was, I don't know if it was I mean, of course, the editing may be the same, but I don't know, maybe some of the poses or maybe some of the.
Absolutely. For me, it was the production in itself. When I saw Olivia Dunne spread, it was a great spread.
Mhm.
As a fellow, former gymnast myself, what she has done is absolutely amazing. She looked great on the beach. And again, from the naked eye, the first thing that popped out was the actual swimsuit. That Gucci swimsuit is not cheap. It is not something that you can just buy, like this online or at your local shopping mall. No, that was, a very tasteful, very expensive bathing suit. And again, when you look at Angel Reese's, her swimsuits were nice, of course. Her swimsuit coverings were nice, but they still weren't even at the same level of what Olivia Dunne was given. And then in them again, you talk about the poses or just the production in itself, the scenery. Angel Reese's, she did a phenomenal job with what she had, but to the naked eye, especially as another Black person myself, what she was given to me at the least wasn't the same as what the other LSU superstar was given. And again, that's just to the naked eye. So it's again, it kind of and that even opens up the door for a larger conversation because we all know that when a lot of Black models,
Mhm.
Black athletes, when they do work with these big publications, they're not always giving what they need, for their shoots or for their projects. When it comes to the hair, the makeup, the clothing. It is something that people of color and Black people have always lacked, when it comes to our white counterparts. We were never given, everything we need. And growing up as a former child actor myself, I can definitely attest that, you know, sets don't always have, the things that we need,
Right.
whether it comes to the makeup, the foundation, the hair products, the hair care, the photographers, the editing team, who are used to editing on Black skin or photographing Black skin. There's a lot that goes into this. And I'm not sure if the production team or whoever, was in charge, kind of thought this fully through. But to the naked eye, these are the biggest differences that I've seen.
Right. And when it comes to, not just the image, name, likeness, and image of the athlete, some companies who are reaching out to these athletes don't necessarily cater to that athlete, personally. I think it's important for athletes to do research on these companies that they're making these deals with. Of course, we know like the big brands like Under Armour, Gatorade, New Balance, Xfinity, but like in Mercedes Benz, because I believe Angel Reese has an NIL deal with Mercedes Benz, but you know, when it comes to other brands like Lululemon,
Yes.
right? Lululemon has been in the news lately, okay? But can we see Lululemon actually, picking up Angel Reese or a Coco Gauff or, an athlete that's at her prime, at the top of her game? Are they really going to cater to what she's wanting? And what goes into that is athletes needing to speak up and ask for what they want, what looks good on you. Yes, these are experts in the industry, but you are able to have a say so in your image. You know what I'm saying?
Far. And
How you look, and I know you have experience in the fashion industry and stuff like that. So when it comes to them, like say if she needed to speak up about a certain look or a certain pose or her hair, do you think they need to be speaking up more?
absolutely. The only way change is going to happen is if, those people do speak up. And I understand that, You might be afraid of losing opportunity if you do, but you're not going to lose anything that is truly meant for you.
Right.
So I don't believe that, there really would be any bad hindrance, in terms of speaking up for what you need. At the end of the day, this project, is attached to your name, is attached to your image. And I'm sure that, as an athlete, and as a big role model for many people of all ages and all races and all backgrounds, you're gonna want to put forward, your best. So with that being said, I do believe it's very important for a lot of these athletes to do their research, to look into the brands that they are connecting with, because ultimately you're not, you can't connect with a brand that doesn't connect with your audience. And it's important that, you're able to, it's important that you're able to, give back to those who support you in a way that, makes sense. Let's be honest. We all know the massive audience that Angel Reese gravitates towards, and we also know the audience that people like Haley and Hannah Camander and Olivia Dunne, cater towards. And there's nothing wrong with both audiences, but understanding that these groups of athletes do cater towards different groups of people, it will kind of determine, who brands will want to work with. And while some brands might not want to work with certain groups of people, that's fine. But, just know that, when you do connect with these brands, ultimately, you're connecting your audience with the brand. And that's the whole thing about NIL. It's being able to reach the audience in a way that these big brands can't.
Right.
Just like a writer, just like a sports journalist who connects the audience, with these athletes, that's what your job is as an athlete, with these NIL deals. You're connecting these big brands with everyday people.
Right. Right. And on another note, what the NIL is like is happening. I mean, obviously you have to be a student, you have to be attending a college, being an athlete. In a way, do you think it could really like encourage athletes to stay in school longer? Because that's what some of them are doing. They're not leaving early right away necessarily when they get their first $1 million bill. Some of them are staying in to get their education as well. Do you think that encourages athletes to stay in college longer as opposed to, like when we were at Ohio State, for instance, they are out the door as soon as that deal is offered to them, So somebody who came to mind is Curtis Samuel. He's gone. And I was thinking, like, I thought he was going to stay a little bit longer, but
Yeah.
in just a few years, do you think that contributes or encourages them to stay longer?
I believe it's happening now. And that is one of the good positive things about the NIL is that it's really able to provide for the athlete and for their families in a way that post NIL, the post NIL era, wasn't able to do.
Right.
Angel Reese, mentioned how she's making more money right now being in college and, WNBA players are, or the money that she'll be able to get if she goes professional. And, Angel, there's nothing wrong with that. Stay in school as long as you need to, get that education, have something to fall back on. I have very close brothers that I was close friends with who were on the football team at Ohio State. They're good enough to get drafted early. They went to the NFL, but they also some couldn't necessarily balance the college life at the same time and playing professionally. So they did end up, eventually coming back later to finish their degree. But the good thing about NIL is that there's no rush to get that contract. There's no rush to kind of get the money.
Right.
You can stay in school long enough while also making money. And that's an important thing because as an athlete, as a former athlete at Ohio State, I know how difficult it is to be that student athlete, to go in the classroom, to train in the gym, but at the same time, not have the money. And Pete, there's such a big misconception about athletes. Not every athlete on the roster has a scholarship. My team was full of 25 guys back when I was on the team. Only 2 scholarships per class. That's about that's about 6 full scholarships, of 25 guys. So, with that being said, if NIL did exist when I was in college, I think that it would have provided such a massive opportunity for so many athletes who struggled, being an athlete and a student, college student, because of reasons financially. And
Right.
if you don't have that scholarship, you got to find other ways to get that tuition, whether that's, getting good grades to get a athletic scholarship, academic scholarship, or possibly, working on the side. But again, it's extremely hard to do as a student athlete.
It is. And like you said, some of these athletes are making more money than the professional players. Like, for instance, Arch Manning, right? Which he was like not number one, but he was up there as far as like
Yeah.
having the highest NIL valuation at what,
Yep.
2.9 million.
Yep.
And that's way more than the average NFL player's salary.
Before starting the season, he was the highest paid college football player by
Yeah,
way of NIL, and he has not even played a snap.
right,
Now he did make a deal with his family, and he said that he won't accept any money until he becomes starter. But again, before the season started, he already was the highest paid, even more than the reigning Heisman winner Caleb Williams at USC, who's still playing college football, who won
right.
a Heisman and still didn't have a more NIL valuation than Arch Manning, who didn't even graduate from high school yet. So
Right.
it's, NIL it's definitely changing the game. It's huge. It is a little difficult on both ends, but I do see the positivity in it, and I'm glad that students are able to profit off of their name, image, and likeness.
Yeah, like number one is what, Bronny James. I believe he's still number one. But then after, this past weekend, thankfully it's football season, so happy
Yeah.
about that. But, with Deion Sanders and his son, Shedeur Sanders, and then Travis Hunter, they have skyrocketed. Okay,
Yes.
their NIL values have skyrocketed to the point where I believe he surpassed Arch Manning now. So I feel like with the guys, it's slightly different a little bit, as opposed to the women, but almost the same because women's sports recently had a spike in support and things of that nature, and then more investors and stuff like that, more viewership. I mean, we just saw the Nebraska's women's volleyball team, that made history. So it's definitely on the up and up. But speaking of Deion Sanders and his children, his daughter actually just joined Meta's NIL Empower 3.0 program to help her with her NIL deals, to help expand her brand and to grow her business. So I feel like that family, they're not like, I mean, they're almost like LeBron James is not exactly the same, but as far as like the notoriety, like
Yes.
the clout that comes
Yeah.
with the games. And so Deion Sanders is a great example of somebody who, of course, cares for the community just like LeBron, but what he's teaching his children, you know what I'm saying, while they're in school. And for him to, he was at the HBCU, which, leads us into our next topic is like, going to an HBCU versus a PWI. We struggled with that ourselves, picking out where we're going to go. Obviously, we chose the Ohio State University, but the HBCU life and the football programs and the universities, they're getting so much more attention, support, funding right now. I mean, they have always been there on the map, but as far as sports programs, as far as academia, and as far as funding, it wasn't there, but it seems like it's there now. And I think Deion Sanders has helped like fast track that in a way,
Tremendously.
especially yeah, with the football team. And even though he decided to leave, he's experienced both. You know what I'm
Yeah.
saying? HBCU and PWI. I mean, why do you think? I mean, not why do you think, but don't you agree that there has been a surge in the support for HBCUs when it comes to the funding, when it
Yes.
comes to sports?
And you know what? I believe that had Deion stayed, they wouldn't have even gotten that much attention as much as they did when he left.
Mm,
Ultimately, Deion did what needed to be done at Jackson State and for HBCUs was done. There's really nothing more Deion could have done. He
right.
transformed that program, the facility. He put the HBCU on the map. And I
Yeah.
think that when he left, he got so much hate. And in my opinion, uh so much hate that from people who truly didn't understand what he did, because he made the transition to a Power Five. But when you look at how many Power Five coaches there are, he's the only Black Power Five coach in the Pac-12. There is 4 in the Big Ten, no in the SEC. I can literally count on one hand, how many Black Power Five coaches there are out of
Right.
all of the 100, out of all of the 132 FBS programs. There are literally, less than 10.
Mm-hmm.
And that's huge. If I'm not mistaken, I think there is at the most 5, maybe 6. But again, he's breaking down that door, for Black coaches to head, top football programs in the country. And that's something that you don't see. When you look at the rosters of teams, more than 80% are predominantly Black.
Yeah.
But when you look at the staff, it's nearly 10% is
Right.
Black. So and not only that, but Deion also brought over some of those HBCU players to these big schools who
Yeah.
would not have the chance to play on this platform had he not transitioned himself.
Right.
So, I believe what he has done for HBCUs was phenomenal. It was massive. They're growing more. I think now people are paying more attention to them,
Yeah.
and not only just society, but even Black people as a culture. I think that now we're paying attention to our HBCUs, not necessarily for the culture, for the band, for the dancers, but now for the sports.
Right.
And that's something that's so huge in itself, because now gymnastics is at 2 HBCU programs, with Talladega and Fisk. And that's not something that, you saw. I didn't have the option to go to HBCU for gymnastics. No, I
Right.
had to go to a PWI. But,
Right.
because of some of the impact like Deion Sanders, who brought so much attention to sports, we're kind of opening up the door to provide more opportunities for us in these spaces.
Right. Right. And just like there was a HBCU that they just, they got the first hockey program at a HBCU, and then Howard University, their swim team just won for the first time in I don't know how many years.
Yeah.
So it's not just about, like them receiving, the funding. Yes, that's a big part of it because, there's a lot of talent there, obviously. I mean, the swim team at Howard, Howard has a rich history, but it took this long for the swim team, to get to where they are. And that also sheds light on, athletes in our community, not just Black people, but in our community, there needs to be more light on certain sports. There's not a lot of Black swimmers, but there are famous, swimmers from Jamaica. There are in other parts of the world. So I feel like here in America, in Black America, shedding light on other sports like swimming, like gymnastics. Gymnastics is an Olympic sport. Swimming is an Olympic sport. And there is kind of some truth to what Noah Lyles has said during the Olympics, like certain sports, are not world champions. Like, it just depends. But those are the sports that we need to be tapping into.
Absolutely.
Because
and it's funny because, when I was at Ohio State, it was no secret that I struggled being the only Black gymnast on the team when I was the only Black gymnast. During my undergrad year, I did have another older teammate by the name of Jake Martin. He was a phenomenal Ohio State gymnastics legend. He was one of my teammates when I was underclassman, but eventually he graduated. And I was just the only Black guy on the team, and it was hard.
Yeah.
And I think it was hard because, one, I didn't have the camaraderie of having my Black brothers with me, going in the gym every day, sharing the same experiences as me. But at the same time, I also didn't have the support from my own Black people.
Mm-hmm.
And, if you want to be honest, gymnastics was not always a sport, especially when it comes to our men, that the Black community always uplifted at all. Football, yes. Basketball, yes. Baseball, yes. Track, yeah. But gymnastics, no. Gymnastics was always deemed as an attack on our masculinity.
Yeah.
And so while it has today kind of became a little easier for us to be involved in the sport and receive support by each other, it wasn't always that way. And it certainly wasn't that way when I was a gymnast at Ohio State.
Right.
And I thank God that my fifth year, the year before I graduated, I came together with a group of Ohio State athletes for the football team, the football, basketball, track and field, um, soccer team. We came together and we created a student athlete organization called RAS, Redefining Athletic Standards. And it was created to amplify and uplift the Black voices of Black male student athletes and dismantle all negative stigmas that surround them. And to God be the glory, that student organization is still around at Ohio State today. It's still a successfully run organization. And what makes me even more proud is that two Black gymnasts on Ohio State's team are leading the organization today. And no way, shape, or form would I have ever imagined that being a part of that small group would have opened up this big door, but it has.
Right.
And now more of us, are starting to, really come together and support. And when two and more are gathered together, we are truly unstoppable. And so to see that support, to see some of the football guys and the lacrosse guys and the Black guys on the soccer team go to the gymnastics competitions, and support their brothers, that means a lot to me, because that was something I didn't have. But it's something that is present today, which is important. And keeping the push that we need for sports like gymnastics and soccer and swimming that predominantly aren't really pushed here in America, like basketball and football.
Yeah, and I know that golf is also getting some light shed on them too, and getting the funding for, I would say more minorities who can't really afford to play golf. Golf is an expensive sport.
Yes,
It
is very expensive.
Now they're getting more funding for those who need those resources. You know what I'm saying? And I think that opens up a lot of doors for golf too. I mean, because we see people like Steph Curry, out here winning stuff, and I'm like, what? Okay, that's awesome. So athletes playing more than one sport is also something that I'm starting to see, that is starting to be more celebrated in a way where it's like it's a trend. So more people are trying to starting to do it. We know Michael Jordan played two sports before. We know Deion Sanders played two sports before. You know what I'm saying? But that took a little pause for some time. People were just sticking to the one sport that they knew that they could, thrive in. But now you're seeing more and more athletes play double sports, show that they're multi-talented, because they are 9 times out of 10. If you could do one sport, there's a likeliness that you could do the other.
Listen, I could have been on that track team. I could have passed the baton to something, girl.
Yeah.
I mean,
right. I was over here thinking like,
listen,
I could have done shot put or disc throw, or
I could have did cheerleading in the fall or something, baby. I could have did something, but
right, exactly. And even volleyball, when I played volleyball in Fort Lauderdale High, like that was something that I was passionate about. So it's just very, exciting to see all the changes. And speaking of changes, we're seeing more Black ownership in sports. According to diverse representation, this NFL season is the season where we've had the highest number of Black minority team owners in the league history. So that's something to celebrate. Just to go down the list quickly, Magic Johnson, some popular names, Melody Hobbs, Lewis Hamilton, Condoleezza Rice. I think people forget that Condoleezza is part owner, is an owner or a president in the NFL. There's quite a few, more than 10 at least, we know that. And I think that's really important to touch on, because I know diverse representation, they're having a Black ownership symposium. I think it's this weekend, if not, on Black ownership, to help people understand the inner workings of tapping into that,
Yes.
And I wanted to be these athletes with all these NIL deals. You know what I'm saying? All this money can go very far. These are long-term relationships that you're building with these brands. You know what I'm saying? It's not a 6-month contract. And so I think that this year it's not over yet. And I think that there are a lot of other changes that we're going to see. We're going to keep seeing more and more of Black ownership in the NFL. We're going to see more Black ownership and more athletes in golf. We're going to see a spike in gymnastics. It just seems like this is the year for a lot of Black athletes to really go full fledged and not hold back and just go for it, no filter. We're seeing a lot more of us in, sports media.
Yes. Yes.
So all the changes, I know all the hirings and the firings and all of that, but either way, we're seeing more and more of us in these
More
spaces.
diversity.
So representation matters.
Representation means everything. I can't even explain that, even to be able to see it on so many different levels, like to see more to see more owners in the NFL, that's huge.
Yeah.
Because, we all know, again, similar to college football, nearly 80% of a lot of these rosters, are full of Black men. But when you look at the top executive offices, you don't see that same number.
Right.
And you don't see that same number when it comes to minorities in general, whether it's Hispanic, Asian, Middle Eastern, Pacific, you don't see that diversity, in the top offices. So to see people like Magic Johnson and Mrs. Melody break these barriers, it lets people know that we can do this. I saw Magic Johnson, he broke out in tears, speaking in an interview about becoming a part owner, because he said, it was just something that as African Americans we couldn't do, and it was so hard for us to do. So to now see us do this, I mean, who knows, in 10 years we could have the first Black majority owner in the NFL.
Yeah, and then they're also we're buying up soccer clubs too. It's not just football. I mean, we're doing football, but then the other football too. So it's like, I like that.
Yeah, even pickleball. LeBron James, he tapped into pickleball. So you're seeing a lot of ownership, in sports across the board, a lot of representation, a lot of people in the media, showcasing diversity, and that's important. It's important for us to see. I remember when I was in school, the only person I ever strongly remembered in the media was Jamil Hill.
Yeah.
Remember, she was an active figure. I'm still upset that we never crossed paths, because
I know.
I would have been underneath you like
I know, right?
I would have been like glue.
Yes.
Just to see that representation is so important.
It is.
You don't know the doors that you can and you will open up when these, representation areas are open.
Yeah, and it's not just that. I mean, when they're in their spaces, they're speaking up. They're speaking on these things that need to change.
Right.
And I'm also glad, to see athletes also stepping into the space too of sports media or hosting or commentating and stuff like that, because that wasn't something, that was really going on, a few years back. And some of them have taken their ideas for the aftermath, like life after football or life after my professional sports career. What can I do? I didn't finish school. What can I do? Oh, you can create your own podcast, take some of that money you made, get you a team and get it together. So we're seeing stuff. I Am Athlete podcast, The Pivot.
It's so important for our stories to be told by us.
Yes.
No one can tell our stories like we can, and no one can tell our experiences like we can. So it's important for us to be in these spaces, to tell our stories. And like you said, you don't need a large audience. You don't need a big team. Invest in yourself. Make that YouTube account, get that podcast, do daily Instagram stories. Either way, keep pushing out those stories, and always know that you don't need a large company backing you up, but you are that company. And you have those stories that people want to hear. But which is the representation factor. It's important, especially in media, because we all know how the media depicts a lot of athletes of color, when it comes to sports. So it's very important that we're in that we fluctuate in these spaces, and really break down these walls.
Right. Well, I can't wait for our next episode, because on the next episode, we're going to be talking a bit about not just mental health awareness and stuff like that, but also sexuality in sports, homophobia in sports, because these are the other topics that don't get enough spotlight, if any at all, besides Pride Month, maybe. That's not enough. So I can't wait for us to talk about that. So, everybody, thanks for tuning in. I want you guys to follow us on our social media platforms. We are on LinkedIn, we're on YouTube, we're on Instagram, we are on Facebook. You can just, I don't want to say it, but you can just Google us.
Yeah, you can.
Yeah, we'll pop up. And so, yeah, Paris, I mean, this was great. Like I said, I can't wait for our next episode. Did you have any last words for the viewers?
Man, I'm excited. Like she says, tune in because we have so much more to talk about. This is a real deal here. We're not holding back anything, but we're letting it all out, and we're gonna be speaking about some things that need to be spoken about.
Yeah, we're just basically gonna keep it raw and real on off the fields. All right, bye guys.